Hi, it's Mary, and it's so right. Today is all about getting ready for the holidays. Taking regular, you go into the craft stores and you'll see wired ribbon, but maybe it's not the color or the fabric that you have, that you want to match it to other things. So say, for instance, you have table runners that you made out of batik fabric, and you want to now coordinate stuff with it. Now you can make things like wired ribbon of your own to match your other stuff. So here I made a bow, and with the serger, I put wire. There's wire inside the overlock stitch that I have here. So after I make the bow and I get it all together, I can then go and shape it nicely and give it a nice crisp look. But also, what if we have a different holiday? What if we're celebrating Hanukkah? You're not going to want red. Maybe we'll do something with blues. But keep this in mind. When I went to do the Christmas one, I picked out a Christmas fabric. And then as I went to stitch it, I noticed when I looked at the wrong side, you didn't see the nice print on the other side. So that's why I turned over to batiks. So when I went to do the Hanukkah one, I went and picked a Hanukkah fabric, forgetting that I wanted to stay with the both sides looking nice. But then when I started to stitch it, I went, oh goodness, look at this. So when I do make my bow, you're going to end up seeing the other side, which isn't as pretty. So here I started to do it in this fabric where on both sides it's the same. Now, one lady did ask me, and I had thought about it the first, before I even talked about it, was I thought about doubling the fabric. I don't recommend that, because when you double the fabric and you start to make the bow, the center here where you're going to wrap the piece around becomes so thick, it's impossible to be able to get it all scrunched up nice and look nice and neat. It's way too big. So you do have to find a fabric that's the same on both sides. Also, it's going to be a question of what threads you're going to use. Over here, I used a narrow overlock. You could do a rolled hem, but when I did the rolled hem, it didn't stand out as much as I wanted. So I turned to a regular narrow overlock, and I used red in the top, and I used green in the bottom. Doesn't mean you have to. You could use red on top and bottom, or green on top and bottom. It doesn't matter. It's all up to what you want it to look like. On here with the blue fabric, I used metallic threads. And I used one metallic thread in my upper looper and one metallic thread in my lower looper. Imagine using metallic threads consistently for long rows of stitching and still get beautiful stitching. Well, when you use the metallic threads on a serger, always put them in your loopers. That's where you're going to get the best feed. They won't be going through the needles. Let me start showing you about what I did to set up the machine. So what we're going to use is a foot that has capability to guide the wire. Different companies might be a different foot, and I've checked several companies, and they have feet that will accommodate guiding a wire under the presser foot, being able to do the overlock stitch over the wire. In this particular case, on this baby lock machine, I'm using the elastic foot. Because in the foot, this is the back of the foot, this is the front of the foot. And there is a hole that's here, and also another hole right behind it. There's this hole and the one down there. So then I just guide the wire through those two holes and out the back. So now what it's going to do is allow the overlock stitch to go right over the wire without hitting the wire. I'm going to put this on the machine, and it's pretty standard as far as changing feet on sergers. And then once I got it under there, I'm going to start to do a little bit of the overlock stitch over the wire. But let me get over to here to threading. If you happen to have the cone holders on the machine, I have found that when I put my spool on here, the thread sometimes starts to drop and gets caught on my cone holders. Yes, Sergers come with caps that you would take the cone holder off and you'd put on the round cap. But I found that as the spool still sits on there, it still can fall below the cap and start winding around here, and then you're going to have a breakage of threads. So what I do is, in some cases, I'll put my cone of whatever thread I have down below the spot that I would have normally put that cone. So if this was here, I'm just going to put it down here. And I'm going to come back to this one in a moment, but I'm using here in my lower looper, I'm using a Robinson Anton Silver metallic thread. And then over here, I have a thread by Superior. It's shimmers. It's so cool to work with. But when I put this on the machine, because there's same ends on each side, and they sometimes get rough, if I was to put this on here, it can get caught on those rough edges. But also, I think you've all noticed if you work with metallic thread, as it feeds off the spool, it starts to kink if it's coming like this. So what I like to do is get my thread that it's rolling off the foot. So here, I'm going to just take this. Now, I've made it, I've adapted things. This is a spool holder for Baby Lock and Brother machines. That's for the normal sewing machine, but in this case, I'm going to use it on the Serger. I'm going to put my spool on here, and I am keeping my cone holder here to raise this up. So now I'm going to put my spool on, and I am going to use a spool cap, because if I don't, the spool will just start sliding off the spool pin. But look now how this is going to spin so freely. This is also great in sewing machines. If you could get your metallic threads that they come off like this, that they just roll off instead of spiraling. They won't kink. Over here in my needle, I have a regular maxi lock thread that complements the other colors that I'm using. Your needle thread isn't going to show so much. You don't have to worry too much about making it 100% matching, but you can use regular maxi lock thread, or you can use an embroidery thread. So I've used regular maxi lock thread in my needle, and I'm doing a narrow overlock. So I'm using my right needle, not my left needle, because I didn't want it overwhelming. So like on the bow, this is a narrow overlock. If I had used a rolled hem, it really didn't show up much. The narrow overlock gave me a little bit more coverage that made it look prettier. Okay, so now I've got my chain already started that I started to stitch before I put the wire in. Now that the wire is in, before I start with my fabric, I'm just going to start to stitch a little bit, and it will start to pull the wire through a little bit. You have to give it a little bit of encouragement. But before I do go further, this is very important. The gauge of the wire. Honestly, this wire is about 30 years old. I don't remember what gauge it is, but it is very thin. It's not heavy. You could go to a little bit heavier wire, but you got to be careful and test it that as it stitches, that the needle is not going to hit the wire. I have used heavier wire on occasion, but in this particular case, I have this very thin gauge. You can see how easy it is to manipulate. So like I said, I'm starting to stitch, and I just get it going. Now I'm going to take my fabric, and I'm going to place this under the presser foot, and I'm going to start to stitch. So I am set up for the three thread narrow overlock. Now I'm going to explain two different stitch lengths. Right now, my stitch length down here, I have it set between 1 and 2. Which makes the stitches very close together. Your stitch width is going to be according to the settings on your instructions for your machine. So I'm going to just start to stitch. Now, just like a sewing machine, the lower the number of the stitch length, the closer the loops are going to get. On a sewing machine, it's the closer the stitches are going to get. So I'm going to go down to just 1. So now my stitch length is even shorter, which are going to bring my loops closer together. So I'm going to start to stitch. Again, what is recommended? It's all up to you and the look that you want to achieve. So after, I'm going to stitch a little. And as I'm going, I am noticing that I'm feeling the wire starting to pull. And it already pulled out of a little bit of this. Now at the very beginning when it started, I could have taken the wire that was hanging out here and folded it back on itself, which would have kept it from pulling out. The tip of my wire is already over here. So as I go a little bit more, I'm going to keep holding on to that in the back. And then I'm going to continue to feed. Now, like I said, I have my stitch length at 1. But I'm going to put my stitch length all the way up to 3. Watch what's going to happen. I'm not going to have as much coverage. It's going to be very open. Okay, over here, if you notice how close all the loops are, my stitch length was down at 1. So the lower the number, the closer your loops are going to be, just like on a sewing machine. The lower the number, the closer the stitches. Then over here, I increased the stitch length to 3, and it spaced it apart, where I don't have as much shimmer as I have back here with the shorter stitch length. Again, this might be something that you like the way it looks, but if you look real close, you can see the wire is right there. I got it with the tweezer. So when you have it with the shorter stitch length, the wire is really covered nicely. All right, now there's another idea. I know what this is about wired ribbon, but this being it's the holidays and you want to decorate everything, instead of using wire, use the same stitch. Fold your fabric in half, and if it's like the fabric like this, fold it in half. And then do a narrow overlock on this edge and this edge. So now treat your strips of fabric like garland, and you can drape them around a doorway, or with the red fabrics or green fabrics, you can put them around the Christmas tree, but treat it like garland instead and twist it as it's going. Oh my goodness, all the great elaborate things that you can do. In here, I used a cording foot to put through the stitching. So this metallic yarn. I'm going to get more into this on a future class that you got to watch for, about using yarns and embellishing with yarns. This is exciting. You can use your serger not just for construction. We're now embellishing, and we're creating craft ideas and embellishing things, and use the metallic threads. Don't be afraid. It's so much fun. Yes, I hope you have a good holiday. And I hope to see you next on my next class. Thank you. Bye.